Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek Interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I am the founder of Teach the Geek. It's an online platform for science and engineering professionals. The first offering of the platform is a public speaking course called Teach the Geek to Speak. To learn more about it, you can go to teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Today, my guest is Shola Kaye, and she's lived a pretty interesting life. She was an IT consultant. She was even a singer at one point. I'm really interested to learn about that. But now she's a speaker, an author, and a coach, and she works primarily in the STEM industries. As I mentioned, I want to learn more about that singing life that she had, her former life in IT, and obviously public speaking. Welcome to Teach the Geek Interviews, Shola.
Hi, Neil. Great to be here. Thanks very much for having me.
You got it. So from the bit of research I did on you, I saw that you studied science in school. So what was the motivation to do that?
You know what? I'd always felt that studying the sciences meant that I could do more afterwards, as in sort of change the world. I kind of visualized myself in a lab, wearing my white lab coat and just doing some things that would change things for everybody. So that was what was in my mind, at least when I chose to do the sciences.
And when you finished the sciences, is that what you ended up doing, being in that lab coat, working in the lab?
Well, once I got my degree, I ended up working in corporate for a while. So I was sort of based in London, came over to the States, did a master's degree in analytical chemistry, actually, and then worked in IT consulting for a number of years. And actually, before that, I trained to be a teacher, and then I came and was the IT consultant in the States. And I did a bit of research, mainly around analytical chemistry, but it was also looking at sort of neurotransmitters and how they work in the brain. But to be perfectly honest, I struggled with being in the lab all the time, and I was doing my master's in Emory, and the weather was really lovely in Atlanta, and I'd be looking out the window, seeing people lying on the grass and just having fun, and I'd be in the lab, and I thought, okay, this has to end here. So that was after that I started going into corporate and doing more corporate related work.
So you would rather be in corporate America looking out the window as opposed to being in the lab working out the window.
Yeah, I guess some people in corporate, I did do some long hours actually, but yeah, I guess at least I had holidays. I felt like when I was doing the lab work, I was kind of perpetually chained to getting decent results. So yeah, not a huge difference though, I agree.
So you'd also mentioned that you trained as a teacher. Did you ever work as one?
I did. So right out of getting my undergraduate degree, I then spent a year training to be a teacher, and then worked in a high school for a couple of years. And I was teaching chemistry. I quite enjoyed the subject, but I did find that dealing with some of the kids was a challenge because I was quite young. They were, perhaps only 4 or 5 years difference than me, and I did find it a little bit of a difficulty sometimes with sort of discipline in the classroom.
What was it like dealing with the parents?
Interesting, actually. The parents were easier to deal with than the kids. I think that maybe has changed. Maybe it's flipped a bit these days, where you've got some very difficult parents who think that their child can do no wrong. But back in those days, at least, the parents did try and play ball, and they were fairly compliant and tried to get their kids to get the work done.
Yeah, I have a cousin who's a teacher, and she often isn't even talking about the kids. She's talking about the parents. And the parents come in, and they think their kid is like the next Einstein, and it's like, no, your kid isn't as bright as you think they are. I mean, you're not as bright as you think you are. What makes you think your kid is that smart? But you have to play ball, I guess.
Absolutely. I mean, we had a few stories of, outraged parents that would come down the school and take their shoe off. And, I think there was one, whether it was an urban myth or what, but there was this one story about the mother that took the shoe off and hit the teacher on the head. And, I didn't see it myself, so I can't guarantee it happened. But yeah, there were some problematic parents around, but not that many.
Your work in IT, was that what you expected it to be?
Well, the company I was working for was sort of mix of IT and management consulting. And because this was my first corporate job out of graduate school, I found it a struggle, quite honestly, because quite often with consulting, you're going in to industry, you're talking to people who have many more years of experience than you, and trying to convince them that you know what you're talking about and that you know that you should be listened to. So I did find it quite a struggle, because I'm the sort of person, I'm an introvert naturally, so consulting, I enjoy helping people, but I need to really feel like I'm a subject matter expert before I can go in. And I think a lot of sort of young consultants, there's a bit of, you know, BS involved, where you've got to, you know, pretend like you know what you're talking about, where really and truly you don't. So I enjoyed the role, and I grew into the role. I had to do a bit of coding. I'd never done any coding before, so I did sort of struggle initially with that, but by the time I ended up leaving that position, which was 4 years later, I did actually feel you know, very happy with my performance. So yeah, it turned out okay in the end.
So when it comes to being a young consultant at these companies, and the companies not necessarily believing that the young consultant has the expertise, you're essentially saying that they're right in thinking that, because they very well might not have it.
I think it's a difficult one, because obviously you've got a team of consultants that go in, don't you? So you've got the kind of the senior people who probably do have that industry experience and guide the younger ones. But as a younger person, you know, you're having to go into those meetings, and there are times where you're being called upon to, you know, give some advice or answer to something. And I think that can be tough if you feel like you haven't got the same amount of gravitas as the client and so on.
Okay, I got you. So I mentioned in the intro that you also worked as a singer for a number of years. Did your work as a singer, was it informed in any way by your work in IT? And if so, how?
That's a good, interesting question. Well, I left the corporate arena for a while, and I'd always had a dream of being a singer, and so I thought, well, there's no time like the present. So I started taking singing lessons, took to it, and then ended up being a professional singer for quite a few years. Was it informed by my time in IT? Probably not. But people do often ask me, as an introvert, how could you be a professional entertainer? And so definitely, I mean, obviously there's quite a few people in IT who are introverts. But the way that I see that is introverts often want to, they're kind of often driven by service, and it's not about trying to it's not so much about ego, but just about doing a really good job. And so for me, every single time I performed, there was always a level of anxiety. It was never like, hey, here I am, you know, do my thing. It was always like, oh, are they going to enjoy it? But I see that as a sort of an approach of humility and not taking anything for granted. So I think someone who's an introvert can be a confident speaker, presenter, entertainer, but the way that they're coming at it is probably a little bit different than somebody who's more extroverted.
What kind of singing did you do?
I sang jazz and Motown. And there's a big contingent in the UK of a certain age who love Motown because that's what they grew up with. And so, yeah, I did quite a lot of that. I preferred jazz because I found it was more creative. There's more opportunity to actually put yourself into it. But I loved both.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I like Motown too. That's cool. So at some point, so you worked as a teacher, you worked in IT, you worked as a singer for a while, and eventually you're doing what you do now. Was the idea to become, you know, self-contained or self-employed, was that something that you had always planned on doing, or is it something that kind of just happened?
It kind of happened because when I had this job, as I said, as an IT management consultant, did that for a number of years, had a sort of 6-month role doing internet stuff, came back to the UK and was an account director. And as an introvert, I was finding I was really struggling in the meetings, struggling to speak up, sometimes being spoken over. As most introverts know, sometimes we need a few seconds to process our thoughts before we get them out there. And I found that the atmosphere wasn't very conducive to introverts, in that company at least, flourishing. And so in the end, after my 6-month contract at the company, they actually said, oh, well, you're not speaking up enough in meetings, you're not adding value. Sorry, we're not going to renew your contract. So at that point, I had one of those moments of, right, I'm never working again for another corporation. And so then at that point, that's where the kind of desire to be self-employed came into it. And so now that I do work with quite a few corporates, but more as a speaker and as a trainer and a coach, I have the ability to kind of use my singing background and my entertainment background and all that I've learned from being in corporate, but to do it as someone who's self-employed. So yeah, there was a bit of a kind of trajectory to that.
Wow, what a foolish company to let you go because of not speaking up in meetings. I mean, a lot of times, at least when I used to sit in meetings when I worked as an employee, the people that spoke weren't necessarily the people that had the best ideas. And not only that, but I would, because I'm a pretty observant person too. You'll have somebody that says something, and then maybe 10, 15 minutes later, another person will say the exact same thing. Maybe use different words, but the exact same sentiment, as if it wasn't just said 10 or 15 minutes ago. But that person that said it the second time, they're not dinged because they didn't say anything original. In fact, they're praised because they spoke up at the meeting. But you added nothing either. You just regurgitated something someone else said. So it makes no sense. I used to notice that in meetings all the time. I used to think this is ridiculous. But yeah, I guess extroverts really do get ahead when it comes to that kind of thing. You know, oh, they talk a lot. That's good, but whatever they say don't make no damn sense. I don't like.
It's very true. There's a quote from Susan Cain, who wrote the book Quiet, that says there's no correlation between being the best talker and having the best idea. So I totally agree with you on that one. And now when I work with my public speaking coaching clients, many of whom are from the tech world, I'm a big one for giving them frameworks. So there's lots of little short frameworks that people can memorize that then free them up from worrying about how to say it, and instead they can just focus on the content. And I've found that that's helped myself and a lot of people to, not necessarily it helps them to speak up, but then when they do speak up, they feel like they know where they're going because they have a roadmap.
Yeah, for sure. So up until this point, what challenges have you faced in building the career you want?
Yeah, interesting one. I think one of the challenges, I think it's very easy to think small. And I think it's, there's that quote, isn't there, that you can underestimate what you can achieve in 5 years, but overestimate what you can achieve in 1. And I think it's being self-employed, it's about having that balance between always pushing to do something more, but also being happy with the progress that you've made. So for me, I think it's the biggest challenge, I think, one of the challenges is looking at people who are salaried and thinking, oh, gosh, your life is so easy, you've got a salary. But equally, I love the freedom of it, but it's just, I think having that balance of delivery and marketing and just having to juggle so many hats, having to juggle so many balls or wear so many hats at the same time.
Yes, we juggle balls and we wear hats. Absolutely. So when it comes to your business, what services do you provide clients?
Thanks for asking that. So I started out primarily doing public speaker training, and I sort of came at it from this perspective of, okay, I'm someone who's got a tech background, but was also a performer. So it was all very much about being authentic, but sort of being a really good speaker, but authentic and just working with your own natural skills rather than trying to be someone that you're not. And then that from there morphed a little bit into sort of keynote speaking, which I still do, obviously training groups as well as individuals. And then I did a TEDx talk a few years ago on empathy in the workplace. And so now with the Black Lives Matter, COVID, leadership, the empathy side of things is probably as large in my business as the speaker coaching. And then that's kind of now transitioned to doing sort of diversity training, inclusion, working with boards and sort of corporate execs to make their teams more inclusive and their leadership more inclusive. So it's quite satisfying because I get to do quite a range of things, but I feel that communication is the underpinning of all of that, because if you can't communicate, then it's very hard to get anything across.
Yeah, for sure. How has this pandemic affected your business?
Yeah, it's funny. At the beginning, it was, you probably know it too, there was that kind of period where for most people, one day they were busy and they were sort of looking to the future, and then the next everything just went and just locked down. And so there was a period where, I did the unthinkable and lay on the sofa and watch daytime TV, all of those sorts of things. And then probably in the last, say, 3 months or so, things started to pick up. So I was doing quite a few, contacting some prospects, contacting old clients, just saying, hey, I'm here, doing a few freebies, doing some stuff, just to stay busy. And then, maybe 2-3 months ago, things suddenly got really busy. And now I'm busier now than I was before lockdown. And in part, I think it's because of the work I'm doing on diversity and inclusion. But then also, I think people are coming back. The companies that haven't been hit too hard by COVID are coming back with a force, because they know that they're behind, or they want to, get things moving again. And then unfortunately, the fact is that COVID has hit different companies and industries very disproportionately. So I say lucky in a way that being in tech, not that all tech companies have been unaffected, of course not, but a lot of the companies that I've worked with have still functioned reasonably well during COVID. So fortunately, the business has been there.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's good that you're working with tech companies as opposed to hotels.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the singing, I was doing a little bit of singing before COVID, but I wanted to kind of stop, but I had some old clients who kept saying, oh, please come back. And then it just kind of ground to a halt. So I really feel for my former colleagues in the entertainment industry and hospitality, because it's just really crippled those industries.
Yeah, for sure. When it comes to public speaking in general and your presentations, do you have a process for putting them together? And if so, what is it?
Yeah, good question. Typically, when the first thing I always do is ask myself a few questions. And when I don't do this first, I always get in a mess. So I always ask myself, what's the one big message? If people walked away with one thing from your talk, what would it be? So that's the first thing. The second thing I would ask myself is, having done the research of who's in the audience, what do I want them to feel, think, or do by the end of the presentation? Also, how I want them to feel during the presentation, so that there's some sort of emotional arc that's taking place, and it's not all on the same level. And then I think also, what do I want to get from this personally? Is this a presentation where I'm trying to get new leads for my business? Is it I want people to walk away with an awareness of something, or ready to change their behavior? So I look at it from what they're going to get, what I'm going to get, what's the big message. And then once I've got that, I can break that big message down into, say, 3 chunks or 3 to 5 chunks. And then at that point, I'm ready to really start to think, what are those chunks? And then sort of put the building blocks together, top and tail it with the ending and the beginning and so on. But that's kind of the initial process for me.
I've asked this question to pretty much everybody that I've ever interviewed on this channel. You're the first person to ever say that when they give a presentation, at least during the planning of it, that they're actually thinking about what they're going to get out of it. Because oftentimes, but people say they'll say they'll talk about the audience. The big message the audience gets, how the audience feels about it afterwards. You're the first person to say, yeah, I need to get something out of this too. There has to be some reciprocity.
Well, it might just be that I want to feel really good about it, because I feel like I did the best that I could. But the thing is, I also work with quite a few people who are self-employed, and obviously they might be speaking to promote their business, and quite often they just create some presentation willy-nilly without even thinking, well, okay, if I want to get leads, at which point do I advertise my service, or at which point do I give people a chance to sign up? And they create something without that being a central mission, as part of the presentation. And so, I sort of reel them back and say, hold on a second, what's in it for you? Do you just have an hour to kill? That's why you're doing this presentation? Or is there something else for you? And people in corporate, it might be, I want to impress my boss, or I want to be to people to know that I have a personality and that it can come out when I'm presenting, or I want to sort of assert myself within the company and make a mark. So I really think it is important to yes, of course, the audience is paramount. The audience is the number one here. But also, what do you need from this? Because especially if you're someone who has anxiety around speaking, or you just see how messy that whole speech creation process is, sometimes it's that the driver to get through all of that is that, oh, well, but by the end of it, if I do a good job, this is what's in it for me. So I do think it's important, not from a really selfish kind of perspective, but just from a, I think you've got to serve yourself as well as everybody else.
Hey man, ain't nothing wrong with being selfish. you get as you said, you gotta get something out of it too. I mean, you gotta look out for yourself. You can't be dependent on other people to look out for you, especially someone like yourself who's self-employed, and this is their business. If you're going to be speaking in front of somebody, you want to be able to get something out of it. Just like you said, new lead, new clients, something. I need something out of this. I'm not just wasting my time talking to you people.
Let's not go too far now. Yeah.
So I mean, I know you'd mentioned when you worked as a singer, you would get anxious before going up and performing. I'm guessing it's probably the same when it comes to public speaking. How do you deal with your nerves?
A big one for me is about service, and I typically have an anxiety, but the anxiety is just, I hope that I give people what they need today. I hope they get what they need from this, and I hope they're satisfied and happy. And I think once I start thinking, well, how can I give them the best, whether it's doing the research, whether it's, if I was singing, playing the songs that people are responding to rather than just having my own agenda. Like, there's nothing worse than a bad DJ, right? And the people just want like the old hits, and the DJ's playing some like pounding techno all night or whatever it is, right? But there's nothing worse than that sort of mismatch between the person who's on the stage and what the audience need. So for me, it being very customer focused and very audience focused, and ensuring I've done the research and then I can serve, that's the thing that for me takes away most of the anxiety, knowing that my heart's in the right place. Yes, I do want, whatever, I want leads or whatever, but the most important thing is for the audience to walk away with the thing that they came for and to feel happy and satisfied. And I know that as long as I keep that need of theirs paramount and make sure that I fulfill that every single time or whenever I can, then that kind of helps to dissipate a lot of that anxiety, whether it's singing or whether it's speaking.
You mentioned something earlier about your services you provide to your clients. You mentioned diversity and inclusion. I'd like to run something by you. So this is something I've just been thinking about. When it comes to inclusion, is there a limit to the amount of inclusion that a company can have? So you'd mentioned the Black Lives Matter movement, and there are a lot of people out there that are really keen on that. They're very big on promoting that Black lives do actually matter. But then there are other people that would say, well, yeah, but all lives matter. And you might have a faction of these all lives matter people at a company, and then a faction of the Black Lives Matter people at a company. Is there any way for both the factions of these people to feel included at the company? And if so, how does that work?
Absolutely. I totally think there's room for everybody in a company, but it takes strong leadership, and it takes diversity and inclusion being embedded into the very way that company is run, and coming right from the very top, so that people understand, first of all, everybody needs to understand, the business case for inclusion and diversity, and the idea that diverse teams get better results than when you've got one, very sort of monolithic group where you've got groupthink and everyone does the same thing. So once that's embedded and people understand that it's coming right from the top, and if people really genuinely want their company to do well, then whatever political persuasion or sort of cultural norms to those individuals, if you want your company to do well and to flourish, then I think you've got, again, it's about service, isn't it? You're serving yourself as an employee, but also you're serving your company. And if you don't have your company's best interests at heart and your customers' best interests at heart and so on, and you're prepared to put a spanner in the works to stop sort of the best performance in your firm, then I think it's then time for somebody within the organization to talk to you, or to, so I think organizations can and do function with diverse groups with possibly very differing interests, but the one thing that's got to unite them and bring everybody together, so there is one in-group rather than lots of in-groups and out-groups, or one big in-group and lots of out-groups, is the performance of the company, and wanting to serve their employer. And I think if people can come at it from that perspective and understand what the goals are of the company, then I think things are at least laid out clearly, and it's up to them if they want to work with it or not, basically.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when I was thinking about that, I was just thinking, if you're one of the people that are, all about Black Lives Matter, and perhaps the senior leadership doesn't, I guess, espouse that same viewpoint, you might think, well, this is a company I don't feel very included in. And on the opposite end, if you're a person that's all about all lives matter, and the company you work for is all about Black Lives Matter, you might think, well, this is a company I don't feel included in. So how so who's correct? I mean, ultimately, I guess you got to be somewhere where you feel all right, and that doesn't necessarily have to be every company.
That's a good point. That's a good point. But I do think that if you've got a strong leadership and a leadership who is forward thinking and inclusive, and I guess once you're saying inclusive leadership, then you are saying that they would maybe not necessarily huge supporters of Black Lives Matter, but wanting the best for society and the individuals within that society and their customers and stakeholders and so on. Once you get to that point, then I think you are talking about sort of inclusive leadership, which will support a diverse culture. And then if people really do vehemently disagree with that, then, they've got to think with their feet, I guess, or just be those dissenters that are just always dragging things back and finding that they're constantly battling and, it's not a very smooth work environment when you've got that going on, basically.
Yeah, for sure. This has been really interesting talking to you, Shola. Is there anything else you'd like to add about things that you're working on?
Gosh, no, I think we've covered it pretty much. But if anyone's interested in finding out a bit more, I mean, I have a bunch of free resources. I have a podcast, which is called Shortcuts to Public Speaking Success, with lots of tips. I have a video blog with about 100 videos with, again, more public speaking tips. I've got a book. I've got a new book coming out in November the 10th, which is called Big Talk, Small Talk, which is about day-to-day interactions. It's very much scenario based. So check me out, sholakaye.com.
Man,
Kaye. Yeah.
You said you had nothing new nothing interesting to add, and you add a bunch of other stuff. You got a book coming, you got a podcast, you got a whole bunch of stuff. Why are you lying to me? Well, everybody, this has been the end of another edition of Teach the Geek Interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I'm the founder of Teach the Geek. It's an online platform for science and engineering professionals. The first offering is Teach the Geek to Speak. It's an online public speaking course. You can learn more about it at teachthegeek.com. Again, that's teachthegeek.com. Until next time, take care and stay safe. Thanks, Shola.
Thank you, Neil. Cheers.